Oh, hello. My name is Salman Hameed, and I'm Assistant Professor of Integrated Science and Humanities at Hampshire College.
I'm Kevin Anderson. I teach courses in film and anthropology at the University of Massachusetts, and this is Film Autopsy.
We're alone. Life is only on Earth. And not for long.
Justine and Mike. Never seen you look so happy.
Enjoy it while it lasts. I myself hate marriages.
She ruined my wedding. I will not look at her. Is everybody in your family start raving mad?
I thought you really wanted this, but I do. What star is that?
Melancholia is just gonna pass right in front of us. And it's gonna be the most beautiful sight ever. It's gonna be a lot different.
What did you expect? I'm afraid of that stupid planet.
Dad said there's nothing to do.
Then he's forgotten about the magic. I want us to be together when it happens.
Hello and welcome to a film autopsy of Melancholia, new film by Danish director Lars von Trier. It stars Kirsten Dunst and Keith Sutherland and Charlotte Gainsborough, and it is essentially structured in two parts, but the opening sequence kind of brings us into a very beautiful but yet tragic scenario about the end of the world, two cosmic bodies colliding. And then the film unfolds with the various characters dealing or not dealing with that reality. And I think it's actually a fantastic performance from everybody all around. Today we have a guest reviewer with us, John Marks, who is a novelist and former producer for 60 Minutes. So John, what was your take on Melancholia?
So I really loved this movie, and I really kind of felt a couple of things about it. The first thing that really fascinated me about it in a way was Kirsten Dunst's her sense of what looks like depression initially. As I'm watching this, I think, okay, here's this this woman who's so incredibly depressed. She's not going to be able to even make it through this wedding. Clearly, everybody around her knows that she's depressed. She's a problem, right? But she's a problem that's sort of familiar to us. She's the kind of person who everybody's walking on eggshells around her. But as the film...
And I would add, and it's her wedding.
And it's her wedding,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's her wedding. And so there's the bride, and everybody's gathered for her, and we're all made to understand that a lot of money has been spent. Mm-hmm. What is wrong with her? As you're watching, you know, it's aggravating for the audience. What's wrong with her? As the film goes on, what really struck me is this is not a depressed woman we're looking at here. This is a woman who knows that everything in existence is about to come to an end, right? The only people who don't know that are everybody else at the wedding. But it's funny because you sort of think, well, this is a movie about clinical depression initially, and Von Trier's going to help us understand, get us into this mindset. But no, he's going to take us on a very different ride. And in the end, kind of what I felt was, you know, this is a guy who is steeping himself and us in a kind of almost Germanic, nihilistic mysticism, real 19th century style. And we start out with a kind of clinical depression scenario, but by the end, you know, the Wagner has overwhelmed us, this enormous planet is hitting us, and we're in the mythical realm. And I just found it to be this audacious, amazing, and strange amalgam that works. Maybe shouldn't have worked, right?
Well, I think, I should say, by the way, since I grew up in Pakistan and I hated going to weddings, and so somehow, I mean, I actually related to that, these never-ended wedding, like, you know, you just keep on going through. So I actually really liked the movie as well, and as you both have mentioned that there were two different parts, and the first part and the first episode, in some sense, is just this wedding component, which reminded Buñuel, for example, is Exterminating Angels, that that this is just people are just not leaving, and there is certainly the element of class aspect in there, but I do think actually that it is a little bit about depression. In the first part, because I thought between the first, where it's about the wedding, anxiety regarding wedding, and in the second part, in many ways, so Kristen Dunst and her sister are the two main characters played by Charlotte Gainsbourg. In the second part, she takes the leading role, and then the planet which is coming close towards it, and the planet is named Melancholia, which is coming in, and in the second part, it's more about how people are handling that. And what we see is Kristen Dunst, who was much more much more anxious at the wedding component, is much better in the second part when the planet is coming close and Charlotte Gainsbourg is falling apart.
Well, the wedding is, as you said, very much about class. It's also about etiquette and rituals and doing what you're supposed to do, and that's a world that she is very uncomfortable navigating in. But again, in the second half, where all the guests have left, it's maybe weeks or a couple months into the future after the wedding, and it's just the small family, and they're dealing with this reality of the end of the world. Her sister and her brother-in-law they become the ones who are unable to deal with that reality. So I think in terms of Lars von Trier presenting a case of depression or being mentally disturbed, it reminded me a little bit of The Idiots, where actually she's the one who is seeing the world for what it actually is.
And that's what depression is. I mean, in the sense that they actually do know things are horrible. I mean, they are the only ones who actually know that. And in the second part, we realize actually she was right. And when she knows that things are going to go horrible, she's fine. Because she was right all along. Her depression was warranted in some sense.
Yeah, it's funny. I love the way that the boy keeps calling her Auntie Steelbreaker. You think about, what is Auntie Steelbreaker? But by the end, you understand exactly what that means. He knows that she's completely capable of facing the end of the world with sort of a sense of, okay, let's do this thing. Yeah. I love the sense in this movie that, I mean, I take what you're saying about depression, but I almost think that von Trier is really playing with our minds here. He knows, in a sense, who we are as an audience, and he knows we're expecting a kind of depression scenario, and those scenarios are kind of familiar to us. We're going to go through an almost a story of survival of depression. In our confessional memoirist culture, you'd sort of think, oh, here's this woman, she's really in trouble. How are we going to see her get through this? And instead, yes, these depressed people may seem to have a sense for that things are wrong, but there's always some alternative presented. Like, yes, but don't you understand? There's love and there's children and all this. No. There's a planet coming right for the planet. It's going to wipe you out.
And we should mention the opening sequence. I mean, you just mentioned it beautifully. It is spectacular. Yeah. I mean, this is the beautiful music. And in many ways, we are not giving anything away by saying that, well, the planet comes in and actually destroys the Earth, because this ending is given right in the beginning. And there are spectacular shots of Kristen Dunst in her wedding dress. I mean, one of sort of like memorable scene that I remember was, and she is trying to walk, and she's being pulled down by the roots of the tree, the weight of marriage.
It was fantastic. It reminded me a little bit of what von Trier referred to in his film Breaking the Waves as the postcard shots, the really gorgeous color images that divided the film in terms of chapters, and he talked about those as being God's eye. Basically, that's God's vision of what's going on, and so the prologue of the film is this gorgeous color photography, very stylized, slow motion and choreography, and yet the wedding sequence or the wedding scenes and then the stuff after that is more along the veins of his Dogma style of handheld, grainy, available light type stuff. So, what kind of contrast do you think he's trying to set up there with these two kind of distinct visual styles?
Well, I think it's part of the secret to von Trier's movies, is that they could be these kind of objects, these abstract objects. They could be just pranks, gimmicks set up to do certain things to the audience and nothing else. And to me, if these movies were all those gorgeous kind of images, those postcard shots, then I think that's what he would be up to. And it would be sort of this contrast between really dark and horrible things and really beautiful images. But I think he really wants us to feel this stuff, right? I think he really wants us to kind of go along. And so in addition to these naturalistic performances that are very raw and real, he takes us on these handheld journeys so that you're right in there. It's almost documentarian style. He seems to do this in a lot of these. it also makes those grand shots of apocalypse, like in Breaking the Waves, the bells at the end. You couldn't have the beauty of that shot without the handheld stuff before. It wouldn't have the same effect.
Right.
So to me, handheld then hits you with this planet shot. You're like, are these worlds together somehow?
And the ending of this film is so beautiful. I mean, this is one of those films like, is the world going to end? Yeah, and it's going to end in a spectacular manner.
They could sell tickets. I mean, exactly. Be there for that.
But I should mention, this is very interesting as a fan of science fiction. Here is a case where, here is a movie where if you have this other planet coming in, we had another movie, Another Earth, where there was another Earth just appeared sort of like nearby. And yet, neither of those films, or in fact, I would say that any of these films that have come out this year, they're not really classified as science fiction. There is no element of reality to those things. It's just, they are just there, and they are a device for saying, having a commentary on other things. And I just found that interesting that you could have the same kind of world-ending disasters type of things as a movie from something else.
So with that being said, who would you gentlemen recommend this film for? So it's not exactly science fiction, it's melodrama, it's fantastic performance. Who would you recommend it to? I
think it's for people who are patient enough to get through. Honestly, I love the party scene too, but I think for some viewers it might move a little slow. I think if you want to... It's tricky. I would say this movie's for everybody, basically. I think it has something for everybody, but I also think in the beginning it has a little bit more of an art house feel. I think it should get beyond and out of that ghetto, though.
Right.
And I think people should have seen at least one Trier film before, because I think otherwise it would be a little too much directly just jumping into this one.
Well, hopefully we see some nominations for the film, possibly Best Director, Kirsten Dunst, I think, for Best Actress, phenomenal, whether or not she'll win, but a fantastic performance. So I think all three of us are saying, or I was about to say, check out Melancholia, Salman.
Well, I was just going to say,
check it out.
If nothing else, see the opening sequence. That is just worth, I mean, if you just pay for the first 15 minutes, it's just worth it.
Yeah, you're in. You see the opening image, you're in.